Hi guys. Welcome back. We're on our final segment, so we're just going to slightly continue with our discussion about cuts to the public health budget, in particular the drug service, and then move on to questions from listeners. So, Andy, just moving forward from that discussion, it is although is the service users don't talk about the service, the secondary effect of drug use is constantly coming up on the residents' surveys. It comes on top in terms of ASB, in terms of people witnessing the buying and selling of drugs on the streets of Tower Hamlets. So it makes in terms of meeting those resident survey demand, it makes more sense, doesn't it, to actually tackle the actual underlying causes than to actually it just seems counter. It doesn't make sense in terms of we're cutting money from dealing with the underlying services, but we're sort of like increasing money to deal with the after effects in terms of social services, in terms of ASB as well. Just final thoughts on that. Is that something that yourselves have picked up on your budget amendment or feedback from residents?
So we know sort of antisocial behaviour is like the top concern of residents. In the last resident survey that was done by the council, and every year it's kind of been increasing in prominence. So it's of greater concern than the affordability of housing in Tower Hamlets, which gives you some idea of how many people are impacted. And one of the things that's happened because of COVID is actually Tower Hamlets, we think nationally, has gone to the top of the number of ASB complaints that are sort of received of any borough in the country. That's partly because we're the densest borough in the country. It's also because traditionally where you had high levels of antisocial behaviour were kind of like the West End, on a Friday night, lots of drunk people, and people obviously aren't doing that right now. So what it has done is moved antisocial behaviour kind of back to more residential areas like Tower Hamlets. So, we have the highest rates in London. The council confirmed that recently. And I suspect also, I know from the data that we have the highest rates in the whole of the country, and therefore everything to do with antisocial behaviour, should be a top priority. I know one of the areas of increase in the budget actually is for the policing teams. So basically, what happens is we give the Met Police extra money, and they give us extra officers at set times, and we kind of tell them what kind of areas that they should be patrolling. So that area has increased. And when you look at the ASB data, it's not all of it, but clearly a part of it is driven by drug use and drug abuse and drug pushes and those issues. So yes, it would make sense to deal with the underlying issues at the same time.
So moving on from this topic, one of the questions I come across when I knock on the doors is complaints from residents about antisocial behavior. That is one of the big issues that I come across when I knock on the doors. Where would people go to, from your experience, what's the most effective way of reporting antisocial behavior or dealing with it?
So this has been a confusing area because there are different routes and different things that you can do. Traditionally, people call the 101 number and then would sort of hang waiting for 40 minutes for that to be answered. So my recommendation is to actually report. So if you go to the Met Police website, there is actually an online antisocial behaviour reporting tool. And my kind of first recommendation is to use that rather than ringing 101, unless you want them, because you're unlikely to get an immediate response with 101. And the second option is on the council website. There's also a separate antisocial behaviour reporting form as well. And my recommendation is, if you have persistent problems, every time it happens, fill in the police report form, because that's then shared with the police and the council. But also, when it first happens, contact the council via their online form as well, because they do have dedicated council officers who look after individual areas. We had a very good officer called Caroline who left recently on the Isle of Dogs, and there's a new officer who's just arrived that I need to get in contact with, so they can maybe deal with some of the more persistent issues. But I know Newham, for example, they have a dedicated phone number, and they also have a bigger group of enforcement officers, so they've put in more resources into this area than we have traditionally. And I think, but to be fair, the mayor has also increased resources. So that team of people I was talking about, at one point, Caroline was the only officer dealing with ASB in the whole of Tower Hamlets. And I know the size of that team has increased, even though they have struggled to retain staff at times.
I think there's a common misconception. So just to explain to listeners, antisocial behavior is not crime per se. And there's a lot of so when it comes to emergency response, it's not something that they would respond to because they would class it as antisocial behavior. It's causing you distress, but there's no actual fear of your safety or of damage to property per se. So it doesn't cross that criminal threshold. But agencies do have tools, etc. One of the things I found quite useful is if you're on a council estate, is to report it to your social landlord, because they have a duty of care. So your social landlord has a duty of care for you to have quiet enjoyment, for you to enjoy. So it does come under their responsibility of you not being harassed in terms of antisocial behavior. And they have tools available. One of the things I've come across is if there is antisocial behavior from a specific property, I have seen sort of like Tower Hamlets Homes do it quite a lot, and other social landlords and other councils is to bring what they call closure orders into the court, where they say, look, no one can enter the property apart from, say, the owner of the property, to move people away from property. So I do suggest another avenue is for you to report it to your social landlord. And I know some social landlords, for example, Poplar Harker, have a dedicated antisocial behavior team who actually deal with those issues. And same with, I think Tower Hamlets Homes have started, got Park Guard as a service as well. Are there any other routes in terms of dealing with antisocial behavior, Andrew, apart from reporting it to the council and reporting it to your social landlord, that you've come across that's quite useful?
Yes, I mean, those are the main routes. And yes, you said that the social landlords as well. And they've also got the power of eviction. So I know people who've been evicted by one housing group for running, drug dealing dens in their apartment. So they do have quite a lot of powers sort of working together. The other thing is sometimes people put their stuff on social media as well, and sometimes that's not appropriate, but sometimes it's quite useful to share problems with other people. I know lots of blocks have WhatsApp groups, so it's also good to talk to your neighbours about some of these issues as well. Talk to your counsellors, because I raise lots of issues. So, to give you an example, there was a theft of a mobile phone. And somebody gave me some private information that they didn't want to, they wanted to remain anonymous, so I passed that on to the police on their behalf. So there's multiple ways of reporting things, but the three main ways are, the police, the local council, and your landlord, and the fourth one obviously is then talking to your neighbours. And I know in some respects, they can get organised and do things as well to some extent. And the interesting thing about Poplar Harker is they're also, like the council, they pay the Met Police extra money. So the Met Police sends special police patrols around the Poplar Harker estates because they've done this deal with Poplar Harker for that extra money. And I think other housing associations could do the same as well if they wanted to. It's kind of like a jointly funding. So they pay some money, and then the Mayor's Office for London pays some money as well. And that basically also buys more police officers who are then dedicated to specific areas.
There's also something called Safer Neighbourhood Teams, which is mainly ward-based, where I know I get invited to it, but I know the chair of my Safer Neighbourhood team, and sometimes I just report things to you. But theoretically, members of the public can attend those meetings and talk about issues. And those are the meetings where the police and stakeholders come together and just think about where they dedicate their resources in terms of police patrols. Do you want to slightly talk about your experience in working with Safer Neighbourhood teams and how
So the Mayor of London has basically made a commitment that each ward should have 2 dedicated ward officers. So these are Met Police officers who in theory at least are basically focused that any work they do is within the ward. They shouldn't be called off to do other emergency things. That unfortunately hasn't been the case for the last year. In addition to those 2 dedicated ward officers, there should be a PCSO, and then there should be a sergeant. So normally like 3 wards have 1 sergeant. So for example, on the Isle of Dogs, they're based at Manchester Road Police Station. In other areas, I think they're still based at Bethnal Green. And yes, every 3 to 4 months, there's these ward panels of the safer neighbourhood teams. They're meant to be led by residents. And one of the things they're supposed to agree in each ward panel meeting is like 3, maybe sometimes 4 priorities for the police to focus on locally. So we had our ward panel for Canary Wharf Ward in January, and one of the things we asked the police to look at was bicycle thefts, because we've had lots of bicycle thefts around the area in recent months. And I've seen the police be more proactive on some of that stuff recently as well. So it does suggest that it works.
Well, we're coming near to the end of the program, but if you do have any further questions on antisocial behavior, you can email myself or Andrew, or contact us on social media, and we're happy to answer questions or signpost you to where you can actually get help with antisocial behavior, because it is something that does affect people's lives, especially when it's done on a regular basis, and it does impact on the quality of life, and it's something that we need to tackle. But we're coming near to the end of our program. Next week, you could join us, where Andrew and I give you the lowdown as to what happens in the budget meeting. Are we going to see a high noon kind of situation, a Mexican standoff, sort of a 3-way Mexican standoff, a bit like the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in the Clint Eastwood movie, or or are we going to see something else? But join us next week, where we just give you the lowdown as to what happened. But if people are interested, they can go on the council website. It's next Thursday, 7:00. It's live streamed. Any final thoughts, Andrew, before we sign off on the forthcoming showdown? Have you got any cards up your sleeves?
No, obviously we'll publish our amendment probably Monday or Tuesday. We'll see what happens with the Chancellor's speech on Wednesday. I have heard through the grapevine there's going to be an important announcement in one area. And then obviously we've got our meeting on the Thursday, so it could be quite interesting the next couple of days from the financial side of the council. But, these are also people's jobs on the line as well. So lots of other people will have a great deal of interest in what happens on Thursday night, not just councillors. Well,
join us on Thursday at the council meeting, and then join us the day after, where Andrew and I do a bit of analysis. But thank you again for watching this watching the politics show with myself, Councillor Premier, and Councillor Andrew Wood. And join us next Friday, 7 to 8. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.